Thanks very much to the organizers for giving me the privilege of giving the keynote today. It's both a privilege and an honor, but I also consider it a responsibility since I kick us off for the 3 days and really want to make sure that we use this time very wisely. I'm going to focus a lot on this word collaboration and not so much on some of the other pieces because the speakers who come after me will be giving many of the details around how we do this and the nuts and bolts of what we need to do together. So we're going to talk about the tip of the iceberg and then what's under the water. Above the water, we see certainly little progress being made in orphan diseases and rare diseases, and stratified medicine's challenge to make common rare. So we are seeing a convergence of the rare and common world, and I think that's something that's significant and we need to pay attention to. What matters, though, I think, is underwater right now. So we should ask the question, what matters? And I think what we understand is that there are many, many stories. All of us know many stories of individuals with rare diseases. And I stand here today because I have 2 children with a rare disease called pseudoxanthoma elasticum. The name is not even important in the long litany of the 7,000 diseases. They were diagnosed in 1994. And I bring here my passion as a mom, and then as a founder of a disease advocacy organization, and then as a researcher in that disease with my background in religious studies, and also with my work now with many, many organizations under the auspices of Genetic Alliance, which is an umbrella for 10,000 organizations, 1,200 of them are disease groups. What we're going to look at right now for 25 seconds only is the name of all 7,000 rare diseases. And this 25 seconds feels very long, but we are only looking very quickly at the names of these diseases and not all the stories beneath them. When I look at the names of all these diseases and all of the people who are behind them, the millions of people, it says to me that we have a great deal to do, and we must do it quickly, and we must do it with a lot of collaboration. I think a lot of times we start to work with each other, and a lot of the kind of business aspects of the disease, drug development, diagnostic development, get in our way, and we fall prey to the kind of common conditions, and I mean that around business that we have with all the other more common conditions. There's plenty here for all of us. There is no reason for us to ever think we have to worry about turf with that many diseases, and really only about 200 or 300 of those having treatments. And so we know we have a very big job, and there's a lot available to us. We need to think about who's behind every one of these diseases, and some of the diseases that I just projected have 3 people in the world with them, and others have hundreds of thousands of people. So I think it's very important for us to look at what we're considering. The business of drug development overall is difficult. We know that. And then I'm just talking in the common realm. And we know that in 2010, for example, a paper showed that there was $600 billion spent in the United States, both by the NIH and by the private sector, on all conditions, and only 21 therapies were approved. Now, there were pot shots taken at the regulatory agency, the FDA, and other things that were trying to place the blame somewhere, but I think placing the blame one place or another certainly doesn't serve us well, and I'm going to talk about that. I think for rare diseases, we have an even more dire kind of situation, and this is a Dilbert cartoon, which is very popular in the US, and the doctor says you've got a bad case of whatchamacallit, and these pills won't fix your underlying problem, but they might give you a wicked case of hemorrhoids, and I can treat hemorrhoids, so that would feel like progress. I think for rare diseases, we have issues around nomenclature, ontology, and natural history, so whatchamacallit is not a good name for what's going on. We have low-end studies. This doctor is looking at one person, and that's often common in rare diseases. We have side effects and adverse events that bring us into some regulatory issues that are hard to navigate. Physicians are frustrated. They don't have the tools they need to treat the patients, and they have an inability to face up to the enormous challenges that are in front of them with rare diseases. And I think the rare disease patient feels a great deal of fear and loneliness. We know that that's why the advocacy community is so vibrant in the rare disease community, but I think that we need to move beyond just support. So we see a changing landscape of medicine, and our chairman gave us some of these things at the beginning, where we have a technology boom going on, both in genomics and in IT. We have personalized genomic information becoming a reality, and stratifying medicines to the point where we are looking at rare in the common conditions, and that we're seeing consumers much more engaged with their own health and in their own health outcomes, trying to move the ball themselves. And I think all of those things bode well for rare diseases, but we need to capitalize on them. I think the other thing we're seeing is a lot of opportunity in this information age, and if we look on the left side of the screen, we see the current condition of the world as we know it in medicine, research, academia, really built upon an industrial age where we had to look at the resources were limited, they were steel and they were wood and they were paper. In the information age, we have an abundance of information, so we need a different model, but we're still using the old one. We had hierarchy as the way of managing the situation. We can use networks now. We had a kind of linear sequential idea that things should move from one end of a spectrum to the other. We're seeing much more organic models emerge. We had to win and lose in the old model, and we can both win in the new model, and information is abundant, and we have a great deal of it. So what does that mean for today? I think it means, and I mean that literally today as well as this era, it means a kind of boundarylessness that we're not used to. We don't have the tools we need to be able to play with each other in a win-win scenario. It means that we need novel models, and I'll talk a little bit about those, and we'll certainly hear about those as we go through the several days. It means we're going to use more open source, and we know that we've seen that be very successful in various technologies and in industries. And we need to use smart networks. We need to figure out how we're going to network to get the job done rather than silo and bring everything into one place. So we could ask the question, what if the funders, the regulatory bodies, and the payers behave differently? Often those are attached to governments. They're not in the private sector. They're more in the public sector. I have written in red here, you can herd cats if you move the food. There's a saying in the US, you cannot herd cats. You can herd cows and sheep and things that herd, but you can if you move the food. And often the funders, the regulatory bodies, and the payers have the ability to move the food. And so the International Rare Disease Consortium, in my estimation, is an attempt and a good one at moving the food. I am not speaking officially for them in any official capacity. I don't have an official role. I just have been a very active player in the founding of this endeavor. And I think what we can see in this endeavor is a way to actually bring people together and to break down some of those silos and begin the boundarylessness. The EU Commission and the National Institutes of Health have led this initiative, and then there are many other countries who have entered into engagement with it. We've had 3 workshops to create a plan in Reykjavik, Bethesda, in the DC area, and in Montreal most recently. Our goal for 2020 is a means to diagnose most rare diseases and to develop 200 new therapies for rare diseases. And Dr. Behrens will talk about this in great detail, so I'm not going to go into even these additional goals. Essentially to say, we're looking at what do you need to put in place, what's the infrastructure, what are the policies, et cetera, to do this kind of bold work and to make this kind of action actually happen. And then achieving these goals is going to require global collaboration and coordination and substantial investment. And so membership in the IRDiRC as a founding member requires a commitment of US $10 million over 5 years starting last January. And again, Dr. Behrens can talk about some of these things. And the areas of collaboration, again, I think are below the tip of the iceberg right now, and they are all of these different areas that we need to get together on that, again, we have an opportunity to look at in a very different way with rare diseases compared to common. So what can the rest of us do? Because the funders are going to come together in this consortium, and we're going to be part of this, and we're going to be able to work together. I'd like to sort of turn that question on its head, though, and look at the other end of this big iceberg and say, what are we actually afraid of? And I really want us to take this quite seriously over the next 3 days. We have a lot of these meetings now. It used to be that we'd have one rare disease meeting every couple of years, and now we have many, many to choose from in 1 year, more than I think may be productive. And so what my challenge, my bold challenge to us is to figure out how are we going to make use of these 3 days, and then how are we going to make use of all this collaborative time together so that we're not just talking at each other, but that we're actually reducing the barriers and achieving the goals. And I want us to look at, through these 3 days, what will happen and what am I afraid of if I really did throw out the old model, put in a new paradigm and really do this differently, not copy the model of common disease, drug development, and diagnostics, but in fact say rare diseases are a space where we can experiment. We can actually remember all those people with all those diseases, and we can do something really bold. I think we're afraid of losing our turf. We are afraid of not getting credit or promotion or recognition or whatever. You won't think I'm smart if I start to throw out ideas that may be useless, but we need to test. My company or my org won't get the funding. Somebody else will get the funding. And I will fail is what I'm afraid of. So I'm going to put myself out here in a really bold way to begin this meeting and say, I'm really interested in these questions and how we each can take these to heart and ask ourselves, what's impeding me from giving up my intellectual property, my idea, my way, and collaborating truly with you as I go through the next 3 days? And feel free to call me on that as we go through the 3 days, and I would like us to be able to call each other on that, because I think we have an opportunity to really change the world, and we're only trying to do that iteratively. It's not going to work. Continuing with the status quo will result in the loved ones that we know dying before we have any solutions. And I like this saying by Buckminster Fuller that says, you can't change this by fighting existing reality. You have to build a new model and look at this in a new way. One of the new models that we've been looking at is looking at the broken model of the linear pipeline, and even just the word pipeline is ridiculous for drug development, for example, and we could go into diagnostics too, but I'm just going to give one example. And to say patients are on a different continuum than the science, we're only going to worry about the patients when we get way down the road to clinical trials, to say that we're going to have all these valleys of death and all these walls between things, and we're going to do this in a linear way, is ridiculous. And it's not working in common diseases, so why are we even trying to just tweak it for rare diseases? Genetic Alliance has been working on a model called Navigating the Ecosystem of Translational Science, and this is a difficult graphic to see, but essentially all these colors are neighborhoods. This whole thing has to be in a networked model. We've got to figure out how are we simultaneously doing all these pieces, and no one company can do all this, no one government can do it all, no one advocacy group can do it all. So we're really going to need to figure out how do we interface with each other and make a difference. The us I'm talking about is the whole. We are the whole. And so for these 3 days, we are the rare disease community, and we have the opportunity to really make a difference. It's up to us. And I want to ask ourselves, what are we going to do with the time that's been given to us, particularly if we do think about the people who aren't here because they died or who are so sick they can't be with us. What are we going to do with the intelligence, the wit, the power, the drive that we have? What's going to happen this hour, this day, this meeting? Are we going to be able to be bold, and will we be able to lead? Thank you.